This is the story of how 4 missing bolts triggered the biggest aviation crisis in 5 years, and why you're paying more for fewer flights because of it. On January 5, 2024, a door plug ripped off an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 9 at 16,000 feet. And while no one died, the fallout from that single event has cost Boeing nearly $12 billion, forced every major American airline to slash their growth plans, and created a capacity shortage that's driven up ticket prices across the country. If you've noticed flights are more expensive lately, or your favorite route disappeared, or your airline just seems to have fewer planes than they used to, this is the reason, and the effects are going to last for years. Let's break down exactly what happened, who's responsible, and what it means for you as a traveler. Portland, Oregon, January 5, 2024. Alaska Airlines Flight 2082 lifted off at 5:07 p.m., bound for Ontario, California, aboard a Boeing 737 MAX 9 that had been in service for just 2 months. 6 minutes into the flight, at 16,000 feet, something catastrophic happened when a 63-pound door plug, a rectangular structure measuring 29 by 59 inches that fills a space where an emergency exit would go on higher capacity versions of the plane, explosively separated from the left side of the fuselage. On board were 71 passengers and 6 crew members who suddenly found themselves in chaos as the cabin decompressed. Items flew out of the aircraft. Phones and AirPods vanished into the Oregon sky, and a teenage boy in row 25 had his shirt literally ripped from his body, while his mother physically held onto him to keep him in his seat. Some passengers started drafting final text messages to their loved ones, convinced these would be their last words. And here's where this story gets incredibly lucky. Seats 26A and 26B, the 2 spots directly beside the gaping hole, sat empty because the passengers who had checked in for those seats were late to the airport. Had they been sitting there, or had this happened at cruising altitude instead of 16,000 feet? This would be a very different video. Captain Brandon Fisher and First Officer Emily Weepred had their headsets ripped away by the decompression, but they managed to safely return the aircraft to Portland in under 20 minutes. 7 passengers and 1 flight attendant walked away with minor injuries. Nobody died. 2 days later, a physics teacher named Bob Sauer found the door plug itself in his Portland area backyard after initially dismissing his neighbor's suggestion to check outside. His call to the NTSB was met with skepticism until he texted them photographic proof. An incident where no one dies might not seem like it should reshape American aviation. But what investigators found in the weeks and months that followed revealed problems so deep and so systemic that they called into question whether Boeing could safely build airplanes at all. The NTSB released their final report on July 10, 2025, and the probable cause they determined was almost unbelievably simple. 4 bolts were never installed. Not broken, not defective, just never put in place. That's what allowed a door plug to separate from a commercial aircraft mid-flight. Here's what happened at Boeing's factory in Renton, Washington. On September 18th and 19th of 2023, workers removed the door plug to repair 5 damaged rivets, which is standard procedure. You fix the rivets, you reinstall the door plug, you put the bolts back in, except they closed up the door plug without reinstalling those 4 securing bolts. And that's when the documentation failure kicked in. No removal record was generated, which violated Boeing's own procedures. And because there was no documentation that the door plug had been opened, no quality assurance inspection was ever triggered. Nobody checked to make sure the bolts were there. Alaska Airlines took delivery of the aircraft in October. Over the next 3 months, that airplane flew 154 flights, and each time the cabin pressurized and depressurized, the unsecured door plug moved slightly, gradually working its way upward millimeter by millimeter until January 5th, when it finally departed the aircraft entirely. The bolts themselves were never recovered, and investigators believe they were likely discarded during manufacturing. What the NTSB found about Boeing's workforce painted a troubling picture. 24 people worked on the door team at the Renton facility, but only 1 of them had training and previous experience actually removing a door plug. Security footage that might have shown what happened had been overwritten before investigators could review it. Workers told investigators they felt pressured to work too fast and were asked to perform jobs they weren't qualified for. One anonymous whistleblower described Boeing's 737 production system as a rambling, shambling disaster waiting to happen. The NTSB placed the blame squarely on Boeing's failure to provide adequate training, guidance, and oversight to ensure the bolts were reinstalled. FAA Administrator Mike Whitaker issued an emergency airworthiness directive within hours of the incident, grounding all 71 Boeing 737-9 MAX aircraft with mid-cabin door plugs for what would become a night. But the bigger action came after. The FAA capped Boeing's 737 MAX production at 38 aircraft per month, when the company had been trying to ramp up to 50 per month, and that cap would remain in place for nearly 2 years. A 6-week audit of Boeing's manufacturing processes produced damning results. Inspectors documented 97 instances at Boeing where procedures or products failed to meet FAA standards, along with 21 instances of non-compliance at Spirit AeroSystems, the supplier that makes the fuselages. Out of 89 product audits, Boeing failed 33 of them, which works out to a 37% failure rate. What struck investigators most was that engineers at Boeing couldn't answer what the FAA called basic questions about quality control policies. September 2025 brought a proposed $3.1 million civil penalty against Boeing, the maximum allowed by law, citing hundreds of quality violations. The agency specifically noted that Boeing presented 2 unairworthy aircraft for FAA certification, and in one case, a Boeing employee allegedly pressured an FAA-designated inspector to approve an aircraft so that Boeing could meet its delivery schedule. The production cap wasn't lifted until October 17, 2025, and even then, it only went up to 42 aircraft per month. Still well below Boeing's original targets. The door plug incident triggered a complete upheaval at the top of Boeing. Dave Calhoun announced his retirement as CEO on March 25, 2024, and stepped down on August 8 with a reported golden parachute worth $45 million. Stan Deal, who ran Boeing commercial airplanes, retired immediately, while board chair Larry Kellner chose not to stand for re-election. Ed Clark, head of the 737 MAX program, departed in February. Kelly Ortberg, a 64-year-old former CEO of Rockwell Collins who came out of retirement to take the job, replaced Calhoun and offered a blunt assessment of what he inherited. His words were direct. "The trust in our company has eroded. We're saddled with too much debt, and we've had serious lapses in our performance across the company, which have disappointed many of our customers." But the leadership changes weren't the only personnel story making headlines. The whistleblowers who came forward and what happened to them added another layer of tragedy. John Barnett spent 32 years as a Boeing quality manager and had raised concerns about manufacturing defects on the 787 Dreamliner, including improperly installed oxygen systems and metal shavings left near flight control wiring. On March 9, 2024, while giving a deposition in his lawsuit against Boeing, he was found dead from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound, and his suicide note read, "I can't do this any longer and I pray Boeing pays." Joshua Dean worked as a quality auditor at Spirit AeroSystems and had first flagged misdrilled holes on 737 MAX aft pressure bulkheads back in October 2022, which led to his firing in April 2023 after raising those concerns. Dean told NPR that he believed they were sending out a message to anybody else, saying, "If you are too loud, we will silence you." He died on May 1, 2004 at age 45 from a sudden MRSA infection. Sam Sailpour, a current Boeing quality engineer, testified before Congress on April 17, 2024, and his words were damning. "They are putting out defective airplanes," he told lawmakers, explaining that when he raised concerns, he was ignored, told not to create delays, and told frankly to shut up. More than 100 whistleblowers contacted the FAA following the Alaska Airlines incident. Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut chaired the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, and the hearings he led produced some remarkable exchanges. Dave Calhoun testified on June 18, 2024, and Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri told him directly that he thought it was a travesty that Calhoun was still in his job. When Calhoun claimed he was proud of Boeing's safety record, Hawley responded with visible incredulity. Under oath, Calhoun admitted that Boeing has retaliated against whistleblowers, putting it this way, "I don't have that number on the tip of my tongue, but I know it happens." He acknowledged that employees had been fired for retaliating against those who raised safety concerns. Blumenthal characterized Boeing's culture as one that continues to prioritize profits, push limits, and disregard its workers, describing it as a culture where those who speak up are silenced and sidelined while blame is pushed down to the factory floor. Internal Boeing communications that were released showed employees describing the 737 MAX as designed by clowns, who in turn are supervised by monkeys. Those are their exact words. Boeing's own chief financial officer, Brian West, admitted in March 2024 that for years they prioritized the movement of the airplane through the factory over getting it done right. That's the company's CFO, saying speed came before quality, and admitting it went on for years. Boeing's financial situation by the numbers is truly staggering. The company posted a full-year net loss of $11.82 billion for 2024 while burning through $13.7 billion in cash, and the third quarter of 2024 alone accounted for a 32% stock decline in 2024 made Boeing the biggest loser in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, with shares hitting a low of 1. Credit agencies Moody's and S&P placed Boeing on review for potential downgrade to junk status, and the company's total debt now exceeds $45 billion. Boeing has not posted an annual profit since, and that's when the workers walked out. On September 13, 2024, a strike began when 33,000 machinists left their jobs, halting production of the 737, 777, 777, 777, 777, 777, 777, 777. The strike ended on November 4, 2024, with workers winning a 38% wage increase over 4 years, raising average machinist pay from about $75,600 to over $119,000, though the deal did not restore the pensions that had been frozen since 2014, which was one of the key demands. October 2024 brought 2 more announcements. Boeing raised $21 billion through a stock sale to shore up its balance sheet, and the company announced 17,000 layoffs, which amounts to 10% of the entire workforce. Now here's where this starts to directly impact you as a traveler, because when Boeing can't deliver planes, airlines can't fly as many routes or carry as many passengers. Let's go airline by airline. Southwest Airlines operates an all-Boeing fleet, flying only 737s, which makes them uniquely vulnerable to Boeing's problems. The airline expected 79 MAX deliveries in 2024 and received just. What made it worse was Southwest's wait for the MAX 7, a smaller variant that still hasn't been certified, leading the airline to remove it from their 2024 fleet plans entirely. Certification isn't expected until August 2026, at the earliest, with the planes actually entering service. And a $31 million loss in the first quarter of 2024 forced Southwest to pause hiring for pilots and flight attendants for the first time in decades, and the airline closed 4 airports: Syracuse, Bellingham, Cozumel, and Houston Intercontinental. CEO Bob Jordan put it bluntly when he said Boeing needs to become a better company, and the deliveries will follow that. United Airlines operates the largest U.S. MAX 9 fleet at 79 aircraft, and the 3-week grounding alone cost them an estimated $200 million, turning what would have been a profitable first quarter into a 20. CEO Scott Kirby delivered perhaps the harshest criticism of any airline executive when he called the MAX 9 grounding probably the straw that broke the camel's back for us. United has now removed the MAX 10 entirely from their fleet plans and doesn't expect any MAX 10 deliveries until 20. Only 63 of the 65 Boeing aircraft they had contracted for arrived in 2020. Alaska Airlines sat at the center of this crisis, and beyond the incident itself, they grounded their 65 MAX 9s for 3 weeks, canceling 11. CEO Ben Minicucci issued a video apology where he said he was more than frustrated and disappointed, describing himself as angry. Boeing paid Alaska $160 million in initial compensation, and the airline now stations dedicated representatives at Boeing 5 days per week, while sending audit teams to inspect quality control. But here's the thing. In January 2026, Alaska actually doubled down and ordered 105 MAX 10s in the largest order in company history, a $17 billion bet on Boeing's recovery. American Airlines posted a $312 million loss in the first quarter of 2024 on record revenue of $112.6 billion, and slowed pilot hiring from 2,000 annually down to 1,300, though they still placed a major order for 115 MAX 10s in March 2024, despite the turmoil. So, what does all of this mean if you're just trying to book a flight? When airlines can't get new planes, they can't add capacity. And when supply can't keep up with demand, prices go up. Industry analysts predicted ticket prices would increase by 25% in 2024 due to capacity constraints caused largely by Boeing's delivery delays. Beyond prices, you're also seeing reduced schedule options on certain routes. When Southwest closes 4 airports, those communities lose service, and when United can't grow as planned, they can't add the new routes they wanted to add. Airlines are also keeping older aircraft in service longer because they're not getting the new planes they expected, which means you might be flying on older equipment than the airline originally planned. The ripple effects extend for years because Southwest doesn't expect MAX 7s until 2027, and United doesn't expect MAX 10s until 2027 or 2028. When an airline doesn't get planes this year, they push back their entire fleet renewal timeline, and the delays compound on each other. The Alaska Airlines incident triggered new legal consequences for Boeing. July 2024 brought a plea agreement where Boeing agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy to defraud the United States. related to the earlier 737 MAX crashes in 2018 and 2019 that killed, with the company agreeing to pay up to $48.722 million in fines plus $45 million in compliance investments. Federal Judge Reed O'Connor rejected that plea deal in December. A new non-prosecution agreement came together in May 2025 between Boeing and the Department of Justice, adding a $243.6 million penalty and $44.5 million going to victims' families. The families of the 2018 and 2019 crash victims weren't satisfied and filed motions opposing the agreement, calling it an atrocious abomination while demanding criminal prosecution of individual Boeing executives. Captain Brandon Fisher, the pilot who safely landed Flight 2082, filed a $10 million lawsuit against Boeing in December 2024, claiming the company tried to make him a scapegoat. The FBI informed him he may have been a victim of criminally negligent conduct. So where are we today? Boeing's production cap was raised from 38 to 42 aircraft per month in October 2025, marking the first increase since the door plug incident. Through August 2025, Boeing delivered 385 total aircraft, already exceeding all of 2024's total of 348 deliveries. And for the 737 MAX specifically, they delivered 2085 through August 2025, compared to December 2024, brought the completion of Boeing's $5 billion acquisition of Spirit Systems, bringing that critical supplier back under Boeing's direct control. The company still has a backlog of nearly 6,000 aircraft on order, which represents years of production even at full capacity. FAA Administrator Brian Bedford addressed the pace of progress by saying that, while it may not be as fast as Boeing would like, it is as fast as they can reasonably move through the process. The MAX 7 and MAX 10 certification timelines remain uncertain, and until those variants are certified, airlines waiting for them, especially Southwest, remain stuck. Let's go back to where we started. 4 bolts never got installed in a Boeing factory because a worker felt pressured to move fast, because there wasn't proper documentation, because no one checked, because the culture prioritized production speed over getting it right. Those 4 missing bolts exposed something much larger. In Boeing's own CFO's words, for years they prioritized the movement of the airplane through the factory over getting it done right. A February 2024 expert panel found what they called a disconnect between Boeing's senior management and workers on safety culture, with employees who do not feel comfortable speaking up. The human cost has been real. Whistleblowers died after raising concerns. A family on Flight 2082 held onto their son as his shirt was ripped from his body. 346 people died in the earlier MAX crashes. The financial cost reached nearly $12 billion in losses for Boeing in 2020, and the cost to you as a traveler shows up in higher prices, fewer routes, delayed growth from the airlines you fly, and older planes staying in service longer. Whether Kelly Ortberg can restore Boeing to the engineering-first culture it was once known for remains the defining question for American aerospace. The company that built the jets that won World War II, that created the 7047, that once stood for the absolute pinnacle of aviation manufacturing, has a long way to go to ruby trust. For now, airlines are hedging their bets by placing orders with Boeing while simultaneously leasing Airbus jets, by sending their own inspectors to Boeing factories, and by adjusting growth plans to account for deliveries that may or may not arrive on time. And travelers are paying the price for all of it. If you found this breakdown helpful, consider subscribing for more coverage of how industry developments affect your travel. Let me know in the comments whether Boeing's delays have affected your travel plans, and whether you've noticed fewer flights or higher prices on routes you frequently fly. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.